Hello everyone, my name is Brinda and welcome to Book Nug Chats. I am super excited to be making this April reading wrap-up video. I read 15 books this month and that's just crazy because this is me getting back into reading fiction again after almost a decade now. So this is quite unexpected. I used to read a lot throughout my teens, but over the past 10 years or so, I just shifted towards reading more nonfiction books and also just watching, more TV shows and more visual storytelling. And so any books that I did read over the past 10 to 12 years were all books that I came across through, that had been adapted to a TV show or a movie. And so then I went ahead and read those books. So this is now genuinely me exploring the world of books and world of stories that exist out there. And I'm so excited. I've had such a great reading month. It's been really exciting. Most of the genres, subgenres, and themes that I've read are new in terms of me reading them. It's been great. Also, I've found different kinds of writing styles, different kinds of, themes being covered in the books. And I love fantasy genre, so that is predominantly what I have read through this month and I'm going to continue reading. But the other genres that I would dip into and reading are, romance and mystery. And if I find a good book, and there are some really great books that I have my eye on, which combine all these three elements in one book, like fantasy, romance, and mystery. And I'm super excited to get to those, they're going to be quite different, But I do like a good literary fiction from time to time. I think it's nice to cut into, when it becomes very intensely fantasy as I'm experiencing. Sometimes it's nice to dip into a genre that is very different, so it just expands your way of thinking and in the way that you process things and in the way that you approach things and the way you take away things from your reading experience. So anyway, without further ado, let me get right into it. I'm going to keep these reviews pretty short. I might make longer reviews on some of these series because they are quite intense series, and there will be more points of discussion that I might have, things I liked, things I didn't like. But for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to focus on the things that I liked. And the things that stood out to me and overall what my experience of reading it was like. So the first book that I want to talk about is the only non-fantasy read I had this month, and this is also the last book that I read, which is Agatha Christie's ABC Murders. I needed a break from all the fantasy that I was reading, so I went ahead and picked up a classic cozy mystery. I love Agatha Christie's style of writing, and it's been a while since I had read one of her books, so it reminded me of all the reasons why I love her writing style. It has a great little balance of wit, charm, humor, and it's just a little clever. And this book particularly had a really nice twist, and it also posed an added challenge for Poirot because this was serial killings and not a very closed personal murder setting. So I had a really good time with this book, and it was the perfect light mystery read that I needed. Then the next two books that I want to talk about are books that I did not enjoy. These are the only two books I did not like. So the first one is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I saw a lot of good, it being recommended a lot. And so I thought I'd give it a try, but it wasn't to my taste. The writing style was way too dramatic, and it turns out that the author, he writes a lot of dramas and plays, so I could tell from the writing. And maybe because it's also a translated works, I don't know, maybe it just doesn't transfer over well. I thought the storytelling, the way the characters are introduced and then the series of events, it felt very choppy. It didn't have a very smooth flow, according to me. Also, the thing that really put me off in the beginning was the first character that was introduced. That woman was really annoying, and I did continue reading. It was hard. I really had to push through this book. It was very repetitive in some elements, in terms of the rules of this time travel that they had. I thought the concept was really interesting, which is why I wanted to read it, but the execution was overall just kind of poor. And the story did get better. I think especially the characters and some of the moments and themes that were explored. It was sweet. It was nice, but it was just hard to read and get through for these reasons. The second book was just a book I came across in the library, so it's not, I hadn't seen any reviews or anything like that. I was looking for a lighter fantasy read, so I picked up a middle grade fantasy, and I wanted something with dragons. So this one's called Dragon's Keep, and this is kind of a medieval England setting, which I did not enjoy in the way that in this book, and I think in general I don't enjoy that setting. But overall, the dialogue writing was really poor, I felt, in this book, and then the pace of storytelling was so slow, even though the book spans over 3 to 4 years. And I think the book had a good message, but the one thing that it greatly lacked for me is that the writing was unable to make me emotionally connect with the characters. Like, I found I just wasn't able to care, and the relationship building, whether it was a friendship or a relationship, was just almost non-existent to poor. So when something happened, it was like, what? You don't feel that evolution, and you don't feel connected to it. So yeah, these were the two books. Okay, so getting into my major fantasy series reads for this month, what initially got me back into the flow of reading itself was my reread of the Harry Potter series. They're my all-time favorite fantasy adventure series, and 5th and 7th books are just like everything amazing. Like, I love those two books, and so it's just so immersive and engaging, and so I wanted to continue reading and trying to read more fantasy books. So I went ahead and looked up some list of fantasy series with romance in it. I wanted something with more romance, and one of the first things that popped up was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So at the time when I picked up these books to read, I'd barely read the synopsis. I went in completely blind. I had no expectations or knowledge of like what any of the story points plot might be, or the characters. I didn't know how popular these were as well. This was also the first actually romantasy book that I've read, the first new adult fantasy that I've read, and also the first book that I've read which has a fae world and fae realm. So I think all these things considered contributed to my reading experience. I have to say, on the whole, I read the trilogy, so Court of Thorns and Roses, Court of Mist and Fury, and Court of Fangs and Ruin. I loved my experience of reading them. It was highly entertaining, so much fun, and just engaging. And I think this is one of those somewhat indulgent reads. It started off in a very typical sort of way. I thought it would be kind of a predictable romance, and I was just enjoying it for what it is. And it was a slow-paced book, the first one, as we get into it, but then the last third of the book kicked things off in a completely different direction, and then the pacing changed, and I was like, wait, what's happening? So that was really great. I was surprised that there were certain choices within the Under the Mountain scenes that were committed to, and what I really liked going into the next book was that the repercussions of that continued to stay. So there was a heavy emotional struggle and that you're dealing with, and so those are some elements overall in the book that I liked. And Fira's character evolution from the first book to what she became in the third book is quite drastic. Another thing that I liked is in terms of her training and learning her skills, there was again struggle reflected in those elements. It wasn't that it just came easy to her. So one thing that I did notice was that because it's first person narrative, there are times that it's hard, especially if you are going into more high fantasy, and there's a lot more action, a lot more events going on. It's hard to capture everything that's happening because unless the character is present there, you can't really show everything. So it was interesting how so sometimes I did feel like it would have been nice to kind of get the perspective of some of the other characters, or get to know what's happening there, maybe by switching the point of views. But it's consistently stayed Fira's point of view throughout, and so it's only if she's present that we get to see. And so as things started building up in the second books and the third books, I felt like that was one aspect that kind of it was interesting. Again, I will say how the author found ways to really expand on the narrative through Fire Up into what's going on in other places. So one of the things when it comes to romantic relationships that I don't like in books is messy love triangles, the constant back and forth, and having to are you going to choose this person, or are you going to choose that person? I really don't I really don't like that. So I was very happy when I read through these books that her relationship, when she moved from one relationship to the other, there was a transition period, and then once she was in her next relationship, and when she was in a relationship, it was quite consistent, like she was in it. And even when there were some like events which were dramatic and maybe messy, she was not confused. I feel like she went through a transition period, and then she was very consistently in it. And as things went on, with as much as was going on, the fundamental relationship did not have any unnecessary drama or unnecessary miscommunication. I felt like those aspects were just dealt with really well, and I was happy to have read a book that just didn't unnecessarily pull apart the relationships. Another aspect that I liked about the series was the author did actually, I would say, a great job of bringing together a lot of different elements and components. So there's action, adventure, political intrigue, friendships, quests, family, and just like also the emotional themes. So I think a lot of different components were brought together, and because it is a first person narratives, also the world building, I think we are getting to know as and when she gets to know about things. So it's very layered in how the world is built up and expanded upon. But I loved the second and third books. I felt like they were so packed with so much going on, and I had a lot of fun with the second and third books, and there were so many twists and turns. It was like a whole roller coaster and of events. I think on the whole, I would give this series 4.5. Yeah, just because of like how much fun it was reading it, and all the things that I liked, and the usual that I might have expected didn't happen exactly in that way in these books. So I was quite happy with that. The second series that I read was the Wraith King series by Grace Draven. The first book is Radiance, the second is Eidolon, and the third is the Epos King. And I absolutely loved this. So this was a third person narrative, and it was refreshing to kind of get into. I think Grace Draven's writing is so beautiful. I love the way she builds up her romantic relationships. Like the evolution is so good, and her dialogue writing is amazing. She has a lot of like really nice humor. And what I really loved about this book, the first book, Radiance, is generally just a romance, and I don't think it's a very long read. I think it's 300 something pages, and what I really loved is that in this case, these the two main characters, so one is a human, the girl, and then the guy, he is actually from a different race. So they're Kai warriors, and so they look very different. They have grayish skin, they have different eyes, and more bestial features, so like sharper teeth and claws. So it was so interesting. Like these two different races are coming together out of a sense of duty for their kingdoms, and just how they don't find each other attractive. And it's so funny because they genuinely find each other ugly, and this is not in a superficial way. Like when you read it, there are very specific reasons given for why they find each other ugly or disconcerting in terms of their looks. And so this is really a story of two people coming together and seeing each other for who they are, beyond the physical attraction or beyond the physical elements, and learning to love each other and like building off this friendship and respect and mutual understanding. And it was just so refreshing to read something like that, where it's just a healthy, wholesome, good relationship. And yeah, this was like a more like an arranged marriage romance story, and how they come to love each other for everything, you know, even physically, but because they really see each other in their soul, like who they are. So I thought this was really great, like how they connected over the different qualities that they have and the different experiences that they've had. So the first book was definitely more romance driven and not really as much plot driven, but it's just so nice. The second book was more plot driven, Edelon, and romance was also there. I will say that it's a testament to Grace Draven's writing that I continued reading and enjoyed reading it still, because otherwise the nature of the plot, which was like more darker and like with ghosts and demoniac beings, I don't really like those elements, but I loved her writing and I love her relationship building. So I'm super glad that I read the second book, because that led me to the third book. And the third book was great. It was the perfect blend of romance and a plot. And the third book actually explores the relationship between two other characters who were featured as side characters in the first two books, and it's so good, that romance, the building up, and also the plot. It's kind of like this adventure quest, you know, where they're on this long 1 month long journey and they have a mission, and so it's all the things that they challenges and obstacles they encounter along the way, and the dangers and threats, and then also the time that these two spend together and they get to know each other. And yeah, it's just beautiful. I was so happy to find her. She's an author I would read more books by. Like, I want to read other books which have different settings and stories, you know. So I have a couple of other books of hers on my reading list, and I'm looking forward to getting to those. I would give her series also a 4.5 for different reasons. And yeah, I think Radiance was great, and Wraith King was great. So the second book was my least favorite of the three, but yeah, it was good. So the third fantasy series that I read this month was the Cruel Prince series. I wasn't sure I was going to read this, just because I don't know how I would have liked the traditional fairy folk realm. And initially I did experience feeling like the book was younger, just because the fairy world was like more limited in its setting, and then the kind of creatures and like beings that exist here, it was very reminiscent of children's like fairy tale books and illustrations that I would have had in my mind. And then I struggled to be able to see the characters as older than 14-15 year olds, and they're supposed to be 17-18. I'm not sure why, but I kind of struggled with this in the beginning. But once I got into the flow of it, I was able to get over that part. And the thing that I thought, the first chapter was really impactful, and the pace of the story is great. I thought the storytelling is very concise and very focused, the way Holly Black writes. The thing that I really loved was how it explored a lot of internal conflict within Jude, with relation to a lot of negative emotions, or like power, greed, revenge. Like it really dug deep into these aspects, and at its heart, this entire series was a political intrigue, which I thought was great. One of the things I really loved is that Jude remains a human throughout, and it's genuinely her strategy and cunning and things that she's learned living in this world that take her through it. She has to really draw upon these skills or push herself in other ways, because she is at a disadvantage at its heart. So I really like that element, that it stayed that way consistently, and how she was able to get around a lot of situations in very creative or different ways. And there was definitely a constant threat that existed in this world. It was very dark, and when it says cruel or wicked, I felt like it stayed true to those elements. You genuinely felt like there was danger at every turn, and you never knew who you could trust or what you could trust, because the fairy folk, they're supposed to be very cunning, and like you can't trust them. Just changing loyalties and betrayals, and it was great. So many twists in that way, and it was like very mentally stimulating the way the plot goes. And I think overall as an arc, I thought it had a really good theme and message in terms of what it ended with as well, and I always like that. I love the second and third book. I think the way they picked up the pace and really started building up on more of you know, what was going on, and the stakes just went higher and higher. So and then the whole relationship between Jude and Carden, like it was just so it was just really good. Like there was a lot of tension there, and there was like a lot of good moments, but then you never know, anything can change at any point, and you couldn't trust everything. So I had a really great experience reading these. Again, I think I would give them as a whole a 4.5. This was another great you know, very engaging read for me. So in between all these fantasy reads, I needed a lighter read, and so I decided to try Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is not something typically I would read because the main character is an orc, and that's very unusual, and I picked this up and I thought I'll give it a try. I'd seen a lot of recommendations for this being a really nice, cozy fantasy book, low stakes, and I absolutely loved it. This was such a cozy, warm hug of a book. It was just really lighthearted. I thought it was very meaningful in terms of, you know, you're on this journey of making a change in your life, and you're moving into a different phase of life, and you're maybe trying something new and setting up something new for yourself, and the feelings that come along with it, or the journey or process of actually building something for yourself. Also this theme of just finding who you are, you know, and like exploring a different side of yourself. So I think those elements were so beautifully conveyed, and what I really loved about this is like, this is a high fantasy world, but the things that are actually new in this world is something that's so common for us, you know, like coffee and pastries, and it's just that it was so interesting to see these things through the eyes of somebody who's never seen them before, and just like the experience they're having with their first sip of a latte, or you know, and then the whole process of actually discovering new things to put on the menu. I thought it was just such a heartwarming story, and there was a good stakes moment at the end. It was a perfect, light, relaxed read, and I needed something like that after all these intense fantasy reads, and just a standalone, sometimes it's really nice. It's a complete story in one book in itself. So I was very happy. Like this was something I was just reading in between, and just a chapter here, chapter there. I took my time with it, so I could just ease into it and just relax. So yeah, I love this one. So the 15th and final book that I read this month, though it wasn't the last book that I read, just the last one I'm going to talk about, is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I loved her writing. She has such a lyrical prose, and I love the concept of this book, these letters of enchantment and these magical typewriters that connected these two individuals. And it was such a lovely story. I thought the fantasy elements and world building was woven into it. Was like, I think it's like a more urban sort of fantasy, and it really built up the stakes by the end. I thought it covered a lot of really great themes, like in terms of grief, loss, war, sacrifice. I thought these were really well done, and I really liked the rivalry between the two, and then the setting of them being journalists as well, and just the way this evolves into more. It was just so sweet. The romance was so sweet, and evolution was great, and so I really liked Iris as a character, and Roman Kit as well. So it ended on a cliffhanger, and I have yet to read Ruthless Vows. I actually look forward to reading more of her books. Rebecca Ross, I think she's somebody whose writing I would really enjoy, and I like the kind of magic she weaves into her stories. So yeah, I thought there were some really nice, thoughtful elements and very reflective elements as well in her writing. I really enjoyed her writing style, so I'm looking forward to reading more books by her. And so that's it for today's video. These are all the books that I read this month, and I'm just happy to be on this renewed reading journey. I've continued to read a lot of books in May as well, but I read a lot more non-fantasy books or lighter fantasy books, but some really great reads in there, and some great 5-star reads in there for me. So yeah, I'll be making another video on that soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in my next one.